took office as prime minister, he recognized that he knew very little about economics. But what he did know was that Estonian inflation was over 1,000%. The economy was declining at a 30% annual rate. Unemployment was over 30%, and 95% of the economy, of course, was state-owned. And he knew one other very important thing, that the Soviets detested and belittled Milton Friedman. Knowing the Soviets, he decided that Friedman must be an extraordinary economic thinker. So he read the only economics book he had ever read to that time, Free to Choose. And our speaker assumed that most of the things Friedman advocated were so logical that they had, of course, been put into practice in the West. So he went ahead and did them. He flipped the economy from 95% government to 90% private. He introduced the flat tax and established attractive corporate tax rates. He cut government spending with serious reductions in welfare programs. He established a stable currency. He liberalized trade, over 90% of which at the time was dependent on Russia, and eliminated tariffs. And lo and behold, it worked. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Mart Laar.
My task is talk about freedom. Actually, I have lived most of my life without freedom. The Soviet system didn't control only the acts of people, but he tried desperately to control the minds and thoughts of people as well. This was an evil system, without no doubt. You see in these pictures the Estonian partisans, which were called the Forest Brothers in Estonia, and who continued more than 10 years after the end of the Second World War, the partisan war or guerrilla war against the Soviet invaders. This was a hopeless fight. Nobody helped us. Nobody even noticed this fight. Nobody was interested in it. These people, just tens of thousands of them actually, big part of the population who supported them, continued nevertheless the fight because they understood in one moment that they couldn't probably win, but they can save the soul of their nation and they can die at least as a free people. And most of them were killed. Of course, as these Forest Brothers were killed and conquered, the resistance movement continued in the different forms, in the civil resistance, through underground organizations, leaflets, magazines, so on. Not again very much noticed in the West. For us, who lost nearly 20% of the population as a result of the Soviet tyranny, these are direct losses. There are people who died. When the Soviet Union was pressed to the corner, they decided to elect the new kind of first secretary, like Mr. Gorbachev, who looked to be young and positive and so on, to really little bit change the facade of the Soviet system, but to mostly keep or protect the socialism and protect the empire. And the Gorbachev made actually one very bad mistake only. He forgot that the democracy is like a toothpaste. It's very easy to let it out, but you couldn't put it back anymore. And in August 1991, exactly 25 years ago, I remember these days very well, we became free again. Of course, this was the moment of joy and happiness. This was a big, big feeling. It looked that everything is so fine and all problems are gone. But then we waked up and we saw what we are having heritated from the communism. We have heritated the destroyed country because the 50 years of the communism really kills and destroys. This is the picture of the food shop when you don't understand what that is. In 1992, only which was available in these times in the food shop when you mostly can find the bread or milk or whatsoever were Armenian brandy and Russian vodka. That's it. And the old economical situation which was soon described was really devastating. The inflation more than 1,000%, economy going down. We were absolutely dependent from Russia. We had food rationed, no gas for the cars, which means no cars on the streets. And it looked that there is no hope really out of this situation because everything was really falling apart and everything was going down. And in this moment, of course, there was not very much people who hoped that the situation can be better. When we are looking back on these days now, looking on Estonia now, actually it's even hard to imagine how this country looked like. Because the changes have been remarkably fast by combining the different indexings and different lists, starting from the list of economic freedom made by the Heritage Foundation and Wall Street Journal, and ending with the Human Watch and Amnesty International lists. Estonia is the most free country in the world. I must say the foreign advisors, starting from the IMF and ending with a lot of other advisors, they protested nearly against all the reforms what Estonia did. They said, this is dangerous, don't do it, don't try it, nobody has done it. And in this context, I am looking back and I'm very happy that I was only 32 years old then, because when you are young, you don't listen to older people. Estonia is on top of the world on the e-services used by the people, which means that you can do enormous amount of things now electronically, starting from the making your tax declaration. Last year, more than 80% of Estonians made their tax declaration electronically. We can say that we are really doing well. And what is most important, this economical growth is really much followed by the very strong social development. Very often the people say, okay, Estonia and other countries can do such of liberal reforms, and then the rich people only become rich, and the poor people will stay even more poor. Estonian example is very opposite. When you do the real liberal and open reforms, and even when you are cutting the social networks, actually you are getting your social networks better. My philosophy as a prime minister was understand one thing, that I couldn't change the country. The prime ministers or the governments couldn't. Only people can. This is a very simple philosophy, but at the same time I have seen a lot of colleagues whom only goal in the politics is to stay in power forever. They just think that they are so good guys that they know what is good for the country. To be very frank, I am always very suspicious what I know. And my task is to really to create only these conditions, rule of law, property rights, and so on, which are needed for people to really to do their business and make their own decisions. This is the best way, actually, to get your countries and your people up.